We have our one dart skirt block, and what I want to do is manipulate this into a flared skirt. I already created one video using the 7-inch punch hole. I think this time I'll use the 4.5-inch punch hole. What I do to figure out how much dot paper I need is I put my front or my center back or center front, depending on which one I'm doing, down on the dot paper where I think I'm going to place it, or just the table if need be. And then I put something to mark where the guideline is at the hem, and something to mark where the first dart leg is at the waist. And then I choose the punch hole that I want to pivot on, and then I just bring the second dart leg to where the first dart leg was. And that tells me if I'm going to have enough space up here at the top, and if I'm going to have enough space down here in this bottom corner. Now, to really know if I'm going to have enough space in that bottom corner, what I also have to do is measure from where this guideline was before I closed my dart to where it is now. So the distance there for me is about 6.5. So that means that I need a little more than 3 inches. It would be 3.25, plus I'm going to add seam allowances. So I'll just round up to 4. So beyond this corner, I need another 4 inches to make sure that this is going to work. And up here, I'm going to have 1/2-inch seam allowance going in each direction. So I'm right on the edge, so I think I want to see if I can scoot this down a little bit. But it looks like I'm going to have enough space over there. So that's how I figure it out. So rather than just telling you what mine is, I taught you how to figure it out. So I'm going to move this down, do my same thing, put my awl here, and then pivot. Now I have a lot more space here, so I think that's going to work better. Okay, so I have my front here. The next thing I have to decide is, do I want the front of this skirt to be on the fold or not? So that depends on what style I'm going to do. And I am thinking that I might want to do something that has like opposing stripes. These are just kind of inspo pictures. Of course, I'm doing something way simpler than that, but this is just kind of my thought on what I might want to do. So if I want to do some of those, I need to have my center front on, not on the fold, but I need seam allowance there. So I have to make up my mind right now what I'm going to do. And I guess I'm going to put my center front not on the fold and put seam allowance on the center front. So I will go ahead and draw my center front grain line. I guess I'll draw it 1 inch from the edge of my paper. Oh my pencil is missing. Rude. Luckily I have a ton of them. So, draw my center front grain line. Go ahead and mark that CF. And then put my skirt up to that grain line. I want to leave a little bit at the bottom. I didn't make a mark for where my spot was, so I'm going to have to redo that calculation to make sure. I mean, I know I have enough paper, I just don't know where to place my skirt. Okay, that looks good. So place that back on center front. And then I'll trace, like I'll make a mark for where my green line or my guideline is. And then I'll trace up to the front. Make a mark for where my first dart leg is. Trace up to the front. Then I'll put my awl in my pivot point. So for this I'm using the dart vanishing point or the 4.5 from waist mark. And then I'm just gonna pivot this to close my dart. And then I'll make a mark for where my guideline moved to, and then trace around my skirt. And then I can remove this, make sure that I write my reference number. My reference year, and which dress form my reference was meant to fit. So that's my reference information. So when I do my nice label for this, I'll have to make sure that I include that. So now if I have any little discrepancies or jogs in my waist curve, I would go ahead and take a curve and correct that. But it looks pretty smooth. And so next what I need to do is balance out the side seam. So I'm going to measure from where my guideline was when I first placed this on my dot paper to where my guideline moved when I pivoted the dart closed. So that distance is still 6.5, like I estimated earlier. So I'm going to go out. Let me move this so you can see the corner better. So I'm going to go out from my side seam hem corner, 3.25, because that is half of 6.5. And I will just extend my hemline out in that direction and then make a little mark for where the corner is. And then I will bring that up to my approximately my HBL. So I'm gonna first start by drawing my line from my new flare corner up to my HBL. That looks like if I don't like that corner, then I need to fix this a little bit. So let's see, how do I want to do that? So just trying different curves and edges. So if I do something like this, I am adding to my hip arc width. So I'm giving it even more ease. And I think I'm okay with that. So I'm going to redraw, oops, shift it a little bit. This will give it an easier fit. And so now this looks more smooth. So I'm going to use that as my side seam. I'm going to transfer my HBL notch out further so I can find it later. And then I'm going to erase some of my original draft lines, just so that I know where I want to be. And once I have that, then I can also true my hemline because I have a big gap here. So I usually take a curve. It's going to be very gentle. Let me move this forward so you can see this. And I want to close this gap here, so I'll put the flat part of my curve towards my center. and then my curved part out towards my side seam, and I'll just find a spot where I can very gently draw a curved line to close that gap. So my basic pattern shape is done. So now I will add seam allowance. So I'm just going to sew this to a bodice, and my bodice will have 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance to this as well. And then I'll try a longer ruler for this area here. Now the next thing I have to decide is if this is a style, what am I going to do to the hem? It's curved, so it has to be a pretty small hem. Or I have to make a whole new pattern for a hem facing. So I think I'm going to do maybe a 1/4 inch double roll hem. It's pretty easy to accomplish. Like, it's not that much of a stress. So I'll do, in order to do a 1/4 inch double roll hem, I need 1/2 inch seam allowance or hem allowance. And then once I've established this pattern, this is the front, I do exactly the same thing for the back. And then the only thing I really have to walk for the skirt, the side seams to make sure they match each other. And then, like I said, I had decided that I want to put a seam down my center front to play with the stripes and the grain line. So I'm going to go ahead and add 1/2 inch seam allowance down the center front. And then typically our grain line is parallel to center front. Because I want to play with the grain line, I'm going to be putting my grain line on the bias. So I'm going to find a spot where I can get a nice long grain line. So what I'm doing is I'm taking one 1-inch square of my ruler and I'm dividing it into 2 triangles from corner to corner with my center front. So here's my 1-inch square right here, and I'm having my center front go right through that and divide it into 2 equal triangles to give me my grain line going in this direction. And then to get my grain line going in the other direction, I can do the exact same thing. So here's my square, and I'm having my center front divide it into 2 triangles. At the same time, what should be happening is that one of the lines on my ruler should be right on top of my other grain line that I drew. For this, it looks like I need a longer ruler. And I'm going to have one side of my skirt go on one of these bias grain lines, and I'm going to have the other side of my skirt go on the other bias grain line. So what I would have to do for a production pattern is I would have to have one side of the skirt with one grain line and the other with the other grain line. Because what I want to achieve, I think, is like a chevron. So I don't want them to go like that. And I don't want them to go like that. I want them to go like that and point up towards the waist. And then I'm going to use probably this center front bust dart. So this part of the bodice is on the fold and this is the seam. So if this is on straight grain, then this will be on the bias. And so I'm going to position this so that I get maybe the grain line going this way. So the bodice is going this way and the skirt is going this way. And at the middle, they kind of create like an X or an asterisk type shape. So in order to finish this pattern, I just have to have this exact same procedure on the back. And one more thing I'll do that I'm going to also do on the back is create my seam allowance notches. So I need one at the side waist and I need one at the side hem. So there'll be a notch and a notch here at the side hem telling me where this 1/2 inch seam allowance is. And then I'll also do a notch at my center front waist going that way and my center front hem going that way to tell me where this 1/2 inch seam allowance is. So when I do my back, I'll do the exact same thing. Then I'll create my label for it with my style number, my style name, the name of the piece, and what the reference number was, which dress form it's for, today's date. The other thing I'm going to do on the back is I'm going to make sure that I transfer these double notches. That's going to really help me distinguish my back skirt from my front skirt, because my front skirt won't have any notches on this seam. I could add notches if I want, and if I did, I'd probably do like one notch here and one notch here, so that it couldn't get flipped, and I'd make sure they weren't equidistant so someone couldn't accidentally sew one upside down. So that's it. That's my flared skirt. I just pivoted the dart closed and then measured my flare that opened up at the hem and added 1/2 of that to the side seam, and I'll do the exact same for the other side, and then I'm ready to sew this sample up.